You know, Jesus of Nazareth is one of those names everyone knows, right? An absolute icon. And we almost all think of him as a teacher. But what gets missed so often isn't just what he taught, but how he taught it. His method was so different, so out there for the time, that it was actually seen as, well, deeply subversive. So, let's get into it.
But that just brings up a huge question, doesn't it? How can we possibly know what his teaching style was really like 2,000 years later? It's a real historical puzzle, because when you look at our main sources, they're not exactly straightforward.
Yeah, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're not like diaries or memoirs, you know? It's better to think of them as like mosaics. They're these carefully edited collections of stories and sayings that people were passing around orally for decades. They were put together to paint these theological portraits of Jesus, not to give us a play-by-play biography. And that makes trying to reconstruct his exact teaching style, well, it's a real challenge.
Okay, so it's a puzzle. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Not at all. Because even though the Gospels are complex, they have these consistent, historically solid clues about Jesus' unique way of teaching. And that style was profoundly, well, it was all about liberation.
So to put the pieces of this puzzle together, the Gospels actually give us 3 little comments about his teaching that pop up again and again. And scholars are pretty confident these are historically on the money. So these 3 clues, where he taught, the kind of authority he had, and the main tool he used, they're going to be our roadmap for understanding his radical way of teaching.
All right, let's jump in with our first clue, the setting. Where did all this happen? This is a huge piece of the puzzle, because it tells us so much about who his teaching was for. It was a pedagogy, a way of teaching, designed for everyday people, not the powerful elites.
So you have to picture the scene back then. The established teachers, the scribes, they taught in these exclusive academic-style schools, usually in the big cities. Their audience? The smart, learned elite. Jesus? He did the complete opposite. The Gospels show him walking through these tiny, out-of-the-way rural villages, places like Capernaum and Nazareth, not the big capitals. And who was he talking to? The poor, the uneducated, the outcasts. It was a totally deliberate, non-elitist approach from the get-go.
And get this, his teaching wasn't just about reaching marginalized people. It was about transforming their whole reality. In that culture, words without actions were just hot air. So his miracles, his healings, even his scandalous decision to sit down and eat with sinners, that stuff wasn't separate from his teaching. That was his teaching. This incredible fusion of reflection and action is a concept that modern educators have a name for: praxis.
The amazing educator Paulo Freire just nailed this idea. He said, there's no true word that isn't also a praxis. For Jesus to say something true was to literally change the world. His teaching wasn't just about downloading information into people's heads, it was about changing reality for people individually and for the whole society.
Okay, let's move on to our second clue, which really builds on this whole idea of a pedagogy for the people. You see, the crowds kept saying that Jesus taught as one having authority and not as the scribes. Now that's a fascinating thing to say, because the scribes had a ton of authority. So this tells us that Jesus' authority was something completely different, and frankly, a lot more dangerous.
Think about it like this. Scribal authority was institutional. It came from their formal training, their mastery of tradition, and their official position in society. Jesus had, well, none of that. He was unschooled, not from some high and mighty priestly family, and he operated completely outside the system. His authority was personal, it was charismatic, and it came from what the sources describe as this profound, direct experience of God as Abba, which is like saying father or dad. And that gave him the rock-solid confidence to challenge the status quo head-on.
And you know, the sociologist Max Weber pointed out something really key about this. This kind of personal, charismatic authority is inherently revolutionary. It doesn't get its power from protecting the past, it gets its power from opening up brand new possibilities. It's an authority that is basically guaranteed to clash with established institutions because it just doesn't need their stamp of approval. And that brings us to our third and final clue, the main tool in his teaching toolbox. Jesus taught in parables. But hold on, these were not the simple, cutesy moral stories we might think of. No, they were the absolute core engine of his subversive educational method.
The scholar John Dominic Crossan makes this brilliant distinction. He says a myth is something that establishes a world. It reinforces your worldview and makes you feel stable. A parable? It does the exact opposite. It subverts your world. Jesus' parables were constantly flipping his listeners' expectations upside down. Suddenly, a Samaritan is the hero.
The guys who work for 1 hour get paid the same as the guys who worked all day. A despised tax collector is more righteous than a religious leader. The whole point was to just shatter their comfortable, accepted worldview.
And here's the absolute key to getting how they work. A parable isn't a lecture that just dumps information on you. It's an open-ended story. It's actually incomplete until you, the listener, respond to it. It drops a situation right in your lap and forces you to make a judgment. It's by getting involved with the story that you complete its meaning. It's a dialogue, and it demands that you participate.
You know, this whole process of waking people up and getting them to see things critically, it actually has a name in modern educational theory. It's a form of what Paulo Freire called conscientization. The parables, then, were like this ancient tool designed to spark a critical consciousness in his listeners, to make them see the contradictions and injustices in the world all around them.
So, let's put it all together. You've got a pedagogy for the poor, you've got this revolutionary personal authority, and you have the subversive power of parables. When you combine all three clues, a really clear picture starts to emerge. This unique way of teaching was designed to ignite a profound two-part kind of liberation.
First, there is personal freedom. By showing people their own inherent worth, it aimed to free them from their inner demons. You know, things like greed, fear, and all the illusions that come with social status. But second, it ignited societal freedom. By making people critically aware, it empowered them to challenge the oppressive systems and manipulative stories that kept their society locked down.
And here's the thing, you can't separate those two. They're totally intertwined. The source material uses this powerful metaphor to show it. The point is, yeah, personal change is crucial, but it's just naive to think that society will change if only individuals change one by one. Why? Because people are shaped by the structures they live in. You can't just fix the trees. You have to change the entire climate of the forest. Real, true liberation needs both a change of heart and a change of systems.
So, this whole deep dive into a 2,000-year-old teaching method leaves us with a really provocative question for right here, right now. Imagine an education that's specifically for the marginalized, one that speaks with moral courage, not just institutional clout, and that awakens a critical consciousness to challenge the way things are. What would that kind of truly liberating education even look like in our world today?